a lot to be able to come out in this. For all of you, thank you for your boldness to be able to come out and just speak truth. The risk that you've taken to be able to whistleblower in this process. I want to drill down on a couple of things that you've already mentioned before and to be able to track this a little bit farther on this. Mr. White, you talked about there was a location where 329 children were all sent to the same location. What city was that in?
It's Houston, Texas.
So you became aware that you've got 329 children that are sent to the same address. Who else knew about that?
The entire executive leadership at Health and Human Services knew about it, as well as the Office of Inspector General and the HSI, Homeland Security Investigative Division.
So were additional children being sent there even after it was identified that we had 100 children there, 200 children there, 300 children there?
Yes, Senator, I think that before I left the site that number may have been up to 500 plus.
So no real evaluation from there other than just keep sending them because that gets them out of here?
Yeah, no, the PowerPoint that I put together to demonstrate what was happening, they said was speculative. And I think they told Tara that she had cultural bias, something like that, but they did not take it seriously.
So you've got about 10 to 14 days in OR custody before they've got to be out and it's some sponsor. At this point, what you're saying is it's pretty obvious we need more bed space here, so just send them anywhere besides here.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
No, that's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
So are these political appointees that were aware of this, or was this career employees at HHS that was aware of it?
These are career employees that were aware, but also the prime contractor, which is Cherokee Federal.
You had mentioned before that HHS employees are terrified to be able to be whistleblowers on this. Why?
Yes. Because they know absolutely they'll be fired. That they're scared to lose their livelihood. They're pretty well paid. Bureaucrats are pretty well paid, so they're very fearful of losing their position.
So at this point, your statement is if they're terrified to lose their job because they know senior leadership at HHS will fire them for speaking the truth that people are being trafficked into locations.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
You've been able to share who the names are of people that seem to be putting this kind of pressure on HHS employees to be able to say, don't speak, just send?
Absolutely.
And at this point, have you seen any consequence for any of those individuals?
I have not.
Ms. Harris, let me ask you a question from the state perspective. I've talked to Javier Becerra, leader of HHS. We've talked specifically about the sponsorship issue in a public hearing under oath and tried to press him on people that are not legally present being sponsors in the country. He also assured me that we're letting the states know all about these locations and sponsors. Is Florida aware of every child that's being delivered into Florida by HHS?
That is 100% a false statement by the Secretary. They are not transparent. After repeated requests for transparency from our agency, from our governor, to ensure that those kids, the welfare of those kids can be followed up on, Florida went the extra mile of demanding essentially that there be an agreement between our state and the federal government to continue to have these facilities operate in our state, taking in these kids. And one of the requirements was to ensure that that there would be welfare checks on these kids, that there'd be follow-up. I could not bring a child into my home to foster or to adopt without there being supervised visitation, home studies, background checks, extensive work being done to make sure it's a good match. At a bare minimum, we should require ORR to follow basic standards and requirements in ensuring that these individuals are who they say they are and that these kids are safe when they're placed in these homes.
I would assume you would, as would my state of Oklahoma would do the exact same thing as well, to be able to make sure that they're being put into a safe home on this. I've asked repetitively, do children need to be placed in the home of people that are not legally present in the country? And repetitively, HHS has just said, we're looking for family members. We're looking for sponsors. As I have visited the border multiple times, UACs that are coming across 15, 16-year-old males, very typically, that are coming across have a piece of paper with them saying, this is the address, this is the location where I want to go, this is my quote-unquote sponsor. Of those quote-unquote sponsors, how many of those are family members? How many of those are somebody that's not a relative at all, as far as we can tell, or do we know at this point?
Reporter Hannah Dreier at the New York Times, in one of her data analysis, showed that less than 40% of the children were actually going to their parents. So that defies the purpose of the program as a family reunification, if you're sending people to non-family members. And I think it's very important to note that under this new rule change, they have actually created a position called a unification specialist instead of a reunification specialist. But the purpose of this program is supposed to be family reunification, but they know that's not what they're doing now. They're unifying children with random people here in the United States from a piece of paper that the child has turned in to Border Patrol. That defies belief.
So these individuals do not have a criminal background check from their home country. And I would tell you, I've spoken to some of the previous leadership from Guatemala, and they're furious that we're keeping their children. They're furious about it.
Yes.
Their statement is, if an American child showed up in Guatemala and we kept them, what would you do? We would demand our child back. And he's saying, why in Guatemala you're keeping our children and we don't get a say about it? You hand them off to somebody that is a stranger rather than allowing us to be able to take our own children back. I've got no answer for them on that because the Biden administration is refusing to be able to reunite children back with their families in Guatemala, basically saying I'll hand them off to a trafficker where they'll be safer, apparently, in their perspective. I can't process or comprehend why they would possibly do that, but they're doing it over and over again. They're not doing criminal background checks on individuals of any consequence. They're not checking their home country. They don't have to be legally present in the country. And within days of dropping them off, if they have no idea where they are and no one answers the phone for the location, if they do check in on them, no one actually follows up. Am I tracking this correctly of what's actually happening on the ground day to day?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator, and I'd go so far. I know the stat that Ms. Rodas just quoted. You know, our grand jury identified that in 2/3 of the case, these kids are going to non-parents. We actually, at the department, visited 2 of the homes that are operating in our state, and we interviewed 49 of the youth. Less than 10% of them were going to be going to their parent as a sponsor. That's frightening.
Less than 10%.
Less than 10%.
Okay, go ahead.
Senator, if I may add, in reference to that piece of paper that you'd mentioned, I really want to emphasize, a lot of times those pieces of paper, the names and phone numbers and addresses of sponsors the child is supposed to ask for is being delivered to them or being handed to the children by cartel members so that they are processed into a trafficking situation once they get released from ORR to that sponsor.
Right. But ORR is not evaluating that.
Not in a meaningful way.
Right. What we have said repetitively is the federal government is the last mile delivery for human trafficking, that they're being trafficked through Mexico, and the federal government and the federal taxpayer then picks up the last mile delivery in human trafficking and is putting these young girls into sex slavery, putting these people into labor camps or into who knows what in criminal activity, because right now Javier Pizzera is facilitating the delivery for the end for these children. Am I wrong on that?
No, Senator. Sadly, you are correct.
What is the training currently for vetting of sponsors for HHS? What is their training entail?
There's no training, Senator, for vetting sponsors.
So it's just identifying who the sponsor is.
Get the documents from WhatsApp. That's the training. So, and again, you never see the sponsor face to face. So there's really no way to vet, not even for category ones that we talked about. So Ms. Rodas had mentioned that about 40% of the children or less were going to category 1, which is a parent.
Parents.
That's not done through DNA testing. That's done through presenting birth certificates. Again, we don't know if that birth certificate actually belongs to that child, and we don't know if that ID document and birth certificate belong to the sponsor either, because you never see their face. They just put it on a table, take a picture, and send it to you.
Ms. Ross, anything you want to add to that?
At the beginning of your statement, you had asked, is HHS informing the states about the children they're sending? And I would like to call your attention to my state of Virginia, where the Attorney General, Jason Miyares, on just April 17th of this year, had sent a second letter to the Secretary wanting to know where are the missing children in Virginia. So in a small town of Culpeper, There are many missing children, Guatemalan children, and he's been trying to find them. He's been trying to get the information. Can you please just tell me for my state, who are these sponsors? To no response. This is unacceptable that the federal government has access to information that could save children today, and they're not giving it to the states. So this is a critical issue, and I thank you so much for your concern for these children. HHS is not going to save them. It's going to be you all, and so I thank you.
Well, right now, we're fighting our own government to be able to get basic information out, to be able to protect and value children. I mean, this just shouldn't, it's bizarre to even say that sentence out loud, that we're having to be able to fight this administration to say, stop facilitating human trafficking in our own country. But for some reason, they don't want the photo of a crowd on the southern border, and it's easier just to distribute children nationwide into who knows what, so they don't have a bad photo op at the border. So better politically for them, worse for these kids by far. Y'all, thank you for coming forward for your testimony today. Senator Johnson, thank you.